In this video, I'm not going to teach you an anxiety hack or trick. I'm going to teach you the number one most powerful way to decrease anxiety, fears, and phobias as backed by research. I'm going to teach you the 6 steps to kicking fear's butt by using an exposure hierarchy. If you want to learn to beat your anxiety, one of the most powerful things you can do is develop the skill of facing your fears. And this is a skill that you can learn. But if when you hear just face your fears, that seems both too simple and too difficult at the same time, and you're about ready to turn this off, stay with me for just a second, because I'm going to break this skill down into bite-sized chunks that you work through little by little. Now, it's normal to want to avoid things that make you anxious, but avoidance locks your brain into a cycle of increasing anxiety. And avoidance prevents you from learning that the things you fear aren't as dangerous as you think. So check out my video on the anxiety cycle to learn more about that topic. But the gradual process of facing fears is called exposure. It's a safe and effective process that has been shown to naturally decrease anxiety. Through exposure, you basically rewire your brain to help it know when you're actually safe. Now, you may have tried exposure in the past and it didn't work, and that might be for a couple of reasons. You may have tried to jump into something too scary too soon, which might have put you into the panic zone and actually been re-traumatizing, only reinforcing that fear. Or perhaps you only faced your fear once or twice, but when it still bothered you, you didn't continue. When exposure is done correctly, it can be very effective at overcoming fears and anxiety. Try again. Work with an experienced therapist who can help you stay in the sweet spot of the growth zone and help you stick with it long enough to get lasting results. Facing your fears is often most effective when you start with things that are less scary and you work your way up to facing things that come with a lot of anxiety. As you work the process, you build up a belief in your ability to do hard things, and you might even learn that you enjoy the things you once feared. This process happens naturally when we let go of our addiction to avoidance. So, for example, someone who's afraid of water takes swimming lessons every week, but starts slowly by putting his feet in the water, and then his legs, and then his whole body, and finally is diving underwater. And after a few weeks, he may learn that he loves swimming with his children. So, how to do it? Step 1, make a list of your fears. Write down all of your fears and pick the first one that you want to work on. So if you're afraid of dogs, write down all the situations with dogs that you would feel anxious about. For example, thinking about dogs, looking at pictures of dogs, being in a park with dogs, petting a dog, being in a house with dogs, etc. Step 2, make a personal goal. For example, visit my grandchildren who own a dog in their home. Step 3, build a fear ladder for one fear area. Psychologists like big words to make them feel special, so they call this an exposure hierarchy. So put your fears in order of the things that are least scary to most scary. And you could start by rating the situations from 0 to 10, and then organize those into a list. So write down as many tiny steps as you can think of that will help you reach that goal. This is the part that most people get wrong. They just try to jump into the deep end of their fears and they get freaked out and re-traumatized, and then they escape and their brain reinforces that anxiety, actually increasing the anxiety response. If you want to successfully kick fear's butt, then you need to get really creative at imagining and coming up with these tiny steps. Now, let me give you some examples. If you're afraid of dogs, you could start by watching movies about dogs, looking at pictures of dogs, or looking at a dog through a window. If you're afraid of getting a vaccine, you could watch a video of a needle, or watch an apple being injected, or touch a needle. And you'd practice this over and over again until it was no longer as anxiety-provoking. If you have social anxiety, you could record yourself talking through an imaginary social situation and listen to that recording. Or you could set the goal to say hi to a coworker, and then eventually move up to things like asking a coworker how their weekend was. It's important to have a mix of tasks that are mildly anxiety-provoking, somewhat anxiety-provoking, and some steps that seem out of reach right now. So break down tasks into tiny steps whenever possible. I'm including a link in the description to a site which has a bunch of examples of this. With anxiety, it often seems as if it's all or nothing. There's no middle ground. Either something is comfortable or it makes me panic. But like I said in the introduction, with the right skills, you really can do this. So there's some other ways to make some of these practice exercises easier or harder. And this is called scaffolding, providing yourself some extra support while you're building your abilities. So here's a few ways to do that. You can adapt the length of time that you're doing an activity. So for example, talking to someone for 30 seconds is easier than for 5 minutes. You could add some support. Doing some tasks alone might be easier, but having a friend or a spouse go with you could be a big help for others. Changing the time of day. So if you're afraid of driving over bridges, you could choose to drive over a bridge during the middle of the afternoon while you practice instead of during rush hour. And changing the environment. For example, visiting a dog in a home versus being at an off-leash dog park. So get creative and find ways to break down these big, scary tasks into smaller doses and to build up the support that you need. Now, I do like the idea of physiological self-regulation. I mean, I use grounding techniques and I use these parasympathetic techniques all the time in my life. And they are really helpful as well at limiting the amount of anxiety and sending that sense of security to your body that you need while you're doing an intense task. But you can't ever use them as avoidance. Otherwise, it's going to backfire. So that's the one caveat with using self-regulation techniques. Okay. So once you've broken these tasks down and you've found ways to scaffold them, the next step is facing your fears. So starting with the bottom rung on your ladder, begin to repeatedly engage in that activity. So for example, if you're afraid of dogs, you start by just walking by the dog park every day. The repetition is important, and as soon as you're able, you want to try to lengthen out the time you're there or loop the activity. So you might walk by the dog park 3 times in a row, or you might stand and look at the dog park for 10 minutes. And it's really important for you to stay with that situation long enough for your anxiety to lessen, or at the very least that you set a goal based around a number. So how long you'll be there or how many times you'll do something. Never set a goal like, I'll stay there until or unless I get too anxious, because that's just an invitation to your brain to increase your anxiety levels through avoidance. If you stay in a situation long enough or you do it enough times, your anxiety will go down. This is a fundamental aspect of neuroplasticity. Our brain adapts to situations, and when you keep doing something that feels dangerous, but it is actually safe, your brain has to adapt to that and relabel the situation as safe. Practice willingness during the exposure. It's normal to feel anxious or afraid during exposure. And this is where your unwritten rules are going to try to take over. People with anxiety disorders almost always have the rule of, if it makes me anxious, it must be bad. It must be dangerous, or I can't handle it. These are rules that you made up and you believe them, but they just aren't true. Anxiety is not bad, it's uncomfortable. It's unpleasant, but it serves a function, keeping us safe from real dangers like cliffs and rattlesnakes. But with disordered anxiety, we feel like we're in danger, but we're actually safe. So you have to challenge those thoughts that say that anxiety is dangerous. It's not bad or harmful, it's just hard. You can do hard things. Keep breathing. Just breathe through it. One way you can do this is by tracking your anxiety in the situation. So keep a record of the exposures that you do and write down your anxiety on a scale from 0 to 10. 0 being no fear and 10 being extreme fear. And then stay with the situation until your anxiety goes down by half. It can also be helpful to keep track of your progress by writing down your fear levels and what you learn each time you face a fear. Step 5, repeat. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Keep Keep practicing. You are building neural pathways in your brain. These are like muscles. The more you use them, the bigger and stronger they get. And with time, it gets easier and easier to do the things that were once difficult. Practice as frequently as possible. The more you do it, the faster the fear will fade. Step 6, reinforce courage. Give yourself some credit. You are doing something hard for you. Don't compare yourself with others or put yourself down. Each time you face a fear, say out loud or write down, I did something hard today. I can do hard things, or I'm proud of myself. And allow yourself to feel a sense of accomplishment. When you do, your brain basically releases more dopamine. This is the reward chemical, but it's also the motivation chemical. This helps you feel more motivated the next time to do it again. And if you want, you can set some specific reward for yourself, like plan a fun outing or buy yourself a book or a movie after you reach one of your goals. Make sure to keep track of your progress so you can look back and see how far you've come. When you intentionally allow yourself to feel the fear and do it anyway, you're going to learn that anxiety doesn't have to control you. You're going to build up your self-efficacy, which is your belief in your ability to do hard things. And you're going to be able to live the life that you value. Like, I love this stuff. So if you want more of this, please hit the subscribe button. And please share this video because you never know who could benefit from it. Thank you for watching and take care.